segment of it. And just again, thinking about the technical side of the transcript, you might have noticed that I might have missed a few things, or you might have heard something. I think, for example, right here, he doesn't really say yeah, he says you know. That kind of underscores one thing about transcripts. You can take a long time and do a really good job and get pretty accurate with them, but it takes a while, and there's no such thing as a perfect transcript. You can always make them better and better. Now let me give you some background so we can begin the analysis. That's just the data collection. Some of you may not know who Lance Armstrong is. He's a bicycle racer. You can see the bicycles in the background. A speed bike, I think they're called. Very famous for winning the Tour de France a number of times. Was thought of as one of the best American athletes of all time, up there with people like Michael Jordan and whatnot. And then it turns out that he was caught cheating. He was caught using drugs and had been doing so for a very long time. So that put everything he had done into question. And this was somebody with millions and millions of dollars of corporate sponsorships and stuff like that, and he was dropped from all those. He had many foundations he was behind. I mean, he was big time. So this interview is the first interview, I think, that he had after all of that went down. So he's asking to account for his actions in this interview. So thinking of it that way, given that context, there's a lot of questions you can ask about this. Using this video and this transcript as a guide to analysis. And specifically, here's some questions that you would want to consider for something like this. And these are the type of questions that you should be asking yourself for any kind of data, but especially this kind of data, to try to understand what's going on and what kind of claims you can make with it. Beyond just what he's saying, kind of how he's saying it. So you have what linguistic resources does he use? So what kind of words and intonation, and you can even include things like gesture and whatnot in that. What about the context is important for understanding this interview? So we gave a lot of contextual background just now, but as you'll see in the next few slides, there's other bits of context that come into play that are super interesting also. What asymmetries or other patterns are there in the data? What do they imply? So when you're looking, again, as you did with the language of food projects, you want to find patterns. You want to find places where certain kinds of things group together in some places but don't in other places, right? Patterns. But what do those patterns mean is the next step. Does Lance's speech vary? So that could be a type of pattern, right? And what does the variation index? What do the linguistic variations of Lance index? What kind of identity work is he doing through those indexical properties? And how is Armstrong taking action through what he says and how he says it? All of these questions are actually one big kind of question. They're all related to each other, of course. When you're thinking about patterns again, just to reinforce this, you look at this transcript and you can say, yeah, there's a lot of words, or he's trying to account for his action. He wants us to feel sorry for him. Those are kind of feelings that you get from the transcript and from that data, but it doesn't really tell us. It doesn't really give us an analysis. You could think of a blanket like that. If I just describe this blanket as a bunch of colors or a colorful blanket, it doesn't really tell us anything about the blanket. There's many ways a blanket could be colorful. If I say for more detail that the blanket has dark blue, light blue, gray, red, yellow, and green, that would give us a lot more information about how this blanket is colorful. And I could take it a step further and say those colors are organized in horizontal bands, and so on. So you can step up that descriptive analysis more and more to give somebody a better understanding of what you're describing and what it means. So we'll do that using these transcripts and thinking about the analysis. The first thing that kind of asymmetry, kind of patterned asymmetry that pops up in the transcript, I mean, there's a lot going on, but I'm just going to highlight a few things that'll help you think through this kind of analysis, is the interviewer says it's been 2 years now, 2 years since he was caught doping.